Clear your desk. You're done here. Effective immediately. Lily Carter stood frozen in the marble-floored lobby of Pierce & Associates, her white wedding dress hidden beneath an elegant coat, her heart pounding against her ribs. The security guard shifted uncomfortably beside her, avoiding eye contact. Above them, the morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating what should have been the happiest day of her life. Her boss, Richard Pierce, stood 20 feet away in his corner office doorway, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd waited until this exact moment. He'd known about the wedding for 6 months, had even received an invitation he never bothered to RSVP to. And he chose today, 3 hours before the ceremony, to destroy her. My name is Lily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and until approximately 90 seconds ago, I was the senior vice president of operations at one of Manhattan's most prestigious consulting firms. I built half of this company's client portfolio with my bare hands. I closed deals that other executives couldn't even dream of landing. And this morning, while my bridesmaids were probably arranging flowers at the venue, I came to the office to handle one last emergency before my ceremony. That was my first mistake, caring too much. Richard, I don't understand. Lily's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. I have the Henderson presentation this afternoon. The merger paperwork needs my signature. What's happening? What's happening is that you're no longer needed. Richard stepped closer, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floor. At 53, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit custom-tailored, his watch worth more than most people's cars. We're restructuring. Your position has been eliminated. The security guard cleared his throat. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to hand over your access card and laptop. This couldn't be real. Lily had given 7 years to this company. 7 years of 16-hour days, sacrificed weekends, missed family dinners. She'd built relationships with clients that brought in over $40 million annually. She'd mentored junior staff, streamlined operations, increased efficiency by 37%. On my wedding day? The words came out quieter than she intended. You're doing this on my wedding day? Richard's smirk widened. I heard about that. Congratulations, by the way. Though I suppose you'll have more time to focus on married life now, won't you? He paused, savoring the moment. Assuming the wedding still happens once your fiancé finds out you're unemployed. Something cold settled in Lily's chest. This wasn't just a termination. This was personal. She thought back to 3 months ago, when she'd refused to falsify the quarterly reports Richard had asked her to alter. To 6 weeks ago, when she'd reported the suspicious offshore accounts she'd discovered during an audit. To 2 weeks ago, when she'd quietly documented every questionable transaction and stored copies in 3 separate secure locations. Richard thought he was punishing her. He thought he was teaching her a lesson about loyalty, about keeping her mouth shut, about knowing her place. He had no idea what was coming. I see. Lily carefully removed her access card from her wallet and handed it to the security guard. She powered down her company laptop and placed it on the reception desk. Her movements were calm, measured, almost mechanical. Is there anything else? That's it. You'll receive information about Cobra Insurance and your final paycheck by mail. Richard was already turning away, dismissing her like yesterday's trash. Security will escort you out. As Lily walked toward the elevator, her heels echoing in the vast lobby, she caught sight of Jennifer from accounting watching from the second-floor balcony. Jennifer quickly looked away. Others were watching too, from doorways and behind glass walls. Whispers spread through the office like wildfire. The vice president, fired, on her wedding day. The elevator doors opened, and Lily stepped inside, the security guard following awkwardly. As the doors began to close, she allowed herself one last look at the company she'd helped build. Richard was back in his office, already on the phone, probably calling his lawyer or his accountant. He was laughing. The elevator descended, and with each floor, something inside Lily solidified. The shock was fading, replaced by something colder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. Her phone buzzed. A text from her maid of honor, Grace. Where are you? Hair and makeup in 20 minutes. Lily typed back, "On my way." Everything's fine. Everything was not fine. But it would be. Because Richard Pierce had made 3 critical mistakes. First, he'd underestimated her. Second, he'd humiliated her publicly, ensuring she'd have witnesses to his cruelty. And third, most importantly, he had absolutely no idea who actually owned the majority stake in Pierce and Associates. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto the busy Manhattan street. Lily stepped out into the morning sun, pulled out her phone, and made a call. "Marcus, it's time. File the paperwork today." She hung up and hailed a cab. She had a wedding to get to, after all. And then, once the honeymoon was over, she had a company to reclaim and a career to resurrect from the ashes of Richard Pierce's biggest mistake. If this story of power, betrayal, and corporate revenge is speaking to you, you'll definitely want to stick around for what happens next. The cab pulled away from the curb, leaving Pierce and Associates behind. But in 3 weeks, Lily would walk back through those doors. And when she did, it wouldn't be as an employee. It would be as the owner. The wedding happened. Lily walked down the aisle with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Exchange vows with Daniel Cooper, a kind-hearted architect she'd met 3 years ago at a charity gala. He noticed her distraction during the ceremony, but attributed it to nerves. Her family beamed from the front row, completely unaware that hours earlier their daughter had been publicly humiliated and thrown out of the building she'd helped construct from mediocrity into excellence. She didn't tell Daniel. Not during the reception, not during their first dance, not when they cut the cake while everyone applauded. She held the secret like a knife against her ribs, sharp and cold. Later that night, alone in their hotel suite while Daniel slept, Lily sat by the window overlooking Central Park and let herself remember how it all began. 7 years ago, Pierce and Associates was drowning. Richard had inherited the consulting firm from his father, but lacked the vision to grow it. When Lily interviewed for a junior analyst position, the office had 12 employees and 3 struggling clients. She was 25, fresh out of business school, hungry to prove herself. "You're overqualified for this position," Richard had said during that first interview, eyeing her resume with suspicion. "I'm not interested in qualifications," Lily had replied. "I'm interested in opportunity." Within 6 months, she'd landed the Henderson account, a manufacturing conglomerate that became their anchor client. Within a year, she'd expanded their portfolio to include tech startups and financial institutions. By year 3, Pierce & Associates had grown to 75 employees across 2 floors of prime Manhattan real estate. Richard loved taking credit for her work. At industry conferences, he'd present strategies she'd developed, using her exact words without acknowledgement. When clients praised the innovative approaches, he'd smile and accept their compliments as if the ideas had been his own. Lily hadn't minded, not at first. She was learning, growing, building something real. But then came the promotion she deserved and never received. The bonuses that mysteriously shrank despite record-breaking quarters. The raises that were delayed due to cash flow concerns, while Richard bought his 3rd vacation home in the Hamptons. "You're too emotional for executive leadership," he'd told her 2 years ago when she'd asked about the VP position. Clients respond better to male authority figures. It's just reality. 6 months later, after she'd secured the Westfield merger that saved the company from bankruptcy, he promoted her to senior VP, not because he wanted to, but because 3 major clients had threatened to leave if she wasn't properly recognized. Even then, he'd made it conditional. "This promotion comes with expectations, Lily, loyalty, discretion, understanding how business really works." She'd understood, all right. She understood that he was running the company into the ground with his ego and his shortcuts. She understood that the offshore accounts weren't for tax planning but for embezzlement. She understood that the falsified reports weren't creative accounting but fraud. And she documented everything. Lily's phone buzzed on the hotel nightstand, pulling her from the memory. A text from an unknown number. "Heard about your termination. Richard's telling everyone you were stealing from clients. Making sure you never work in this industry again. J. Jennifer from accounting." The coward wouldn't even use her real number. Lily's hands clenched around the phone. So that was his strategy. Destroy her professionally, poison her reputation, ensure that no competing firm would touch her. He wasn't just firing her, he was burying her. Another text came through, this time from her former assistant, Michelle. "I'm so sorry, Lily. He's already hired your replacement." Some guy from his golf club called an all-hands meeting tomorrow to announce new leadership direction. "Please tell me you're okay." Lily typed back, "I'm better than okay. Take notes at that meeting. I'll want details." She opened her laptop and logged into an encrypted cloud drive. Inside were 7 years of carefully maintained files. Emails showing Richard's orders to falsify reports. Screenshots of the offshore account transfers. Recorded conversations where he admitted to fraud. Testimonies from clients he'd tried to cheat. Evidence of the discrimination lawsuits he'd settled quietly to avoid public scrutiny. But the most important document was buried at the bottom of the folder, a stock certificate issued 12 years ago to Lily's grandmother, Margaret Carter. Margaret had been Richard's father's business partner in the company's earliest days, back when it was called Carter and Pierce Associates. She'd invested her life savings to help launch the firm. But when Jonathan Pierce died suddenly, Richard had pushed Margaret out, rebranded the company, and told everyone she'd simply retired. What Richard never knew was that Margaret hadn't sold her shares. She'd held on to them, watching the company grow, waiting for the right moment. And 5 years ago, before dementia claimed her sharp mind, she'd transferred every single share to her granddaughter. 51% of Pierce and Associates belonged to Lily. Richard owned 49% and believed himself untouchable. The remaining shares were split among minor investors who never attended meetings and rubber-stamped whatever Richard proposed. Lily had kept the secret for 5 years, waiting, learning, building leverage. She'd needed to understand every aspect of the business, to become indispensable, to gather enough evidence to not just take control but to justify it legally and publicly. She'd planned to reveal the truth eventually. In a few more months, once she'd secured 2 more major accounts that were in negotiation. She'd wanted the transition to be smooth, professional, minimally disruptive to employees who depended on the company for their livelihoods. But Richard had forced her hand. He'd humiliated her, threatened her future, tried to destroy everything she'd built. And worst of all, he'd done it with that smug smile, that absolute certainty that he'd won. Daniel stirred in his sleep, and Lily closed the laptop. She'd tell him tomorrow, after they landed in Barcelona for their honeymoon. She'd explain everything, and he'd understand. He always understood. Her phone buzzed one more time. Marcus Chen, her lawyer and grandmother's old friend, paperwork filed with the state. Board meeting scheduled for 3 weeks from today. 10 a.m. sharp. All shareholders required to attend. Richard received official notice an hour ago. "How do you want to play this?" Lily smiled in the darkness of the hotel suite. Let him sweat. Don't respond to any of his calls. I'll see him at the meeting. Outside, the city glittered with a million lights. Somewhere in that vast landscape, Richard Pierce was probably sleeping soundly, dreaming of his empire, convinced that he'd successfully eliminated a threat. He had no idea that the threat hadn't been eliminated. It had just been given a reason to stop holding back. Barcelona was beautiful, but Lily barely saw it. While Daniel explored Gaudia's architecture and dragged her through Los Ramblas, her mind was 3,000 miles away, calculating moves like a chess grandmaster. She told him everything on their second night, over wine at a small restaurant overlooking the Mediterranean. "He fired you on our wedding day?" Daniel's face went from confusion to fury in seconds. "That's unconscionable. It gets worse." Lily explained the embezzlement, the fraud, the systematic destruction he was attempting. "He's telling everyone I was stealing. My phone's been blowing up with former colleagues asking if it's true. We should sue him into oblivion. We're going to do something better." Lily pulled out her tablet and showed him the stock certificate. "We're going to take his company away from him." Daniel stared at the document, then at his wife, then back at the document. "You own controlling interest. How long have you known?" 5 years. My grandmother made me promise to wait until I was ready. Until I knew the business inside and out. Until I had enough evidence to make it stick." She took his hand. "I'm sorry I kept this from you. I needed to be sure about everything, including us, before I weaponized it." He squeezed her fingers. What do you need from me? Support, patience, and maybe help moving into the corner office in 3 weeks. They spent the rest of the honeymoon planning. Daniel, with his architect's precision, helped her map out every potential scenario, every possible countermove Richard might attempt. By the time they landed back in New York, Lily had a strategy that was airtight. Marcus Chen met them at a discreet coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's financial district where someone might recognize them. At 63, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd won more corporate battles than he'd lost. He'd been Margaret's lawyer for 40 years and had watched Lily grow up. Richard's been trying to reach me for 2 weeks, Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. 17 calls, 23 emails, 3 attempted visits to my office. He knows something's wrong but can't figure out what. What's he saying? Demanding to know who called the board meeting. Claiming there's been a procedural error. Threatening legal action. Marcus smiled thinly. His lawyer keeps citing bylaws that don't exist. They're panicking. Lily opened the folder. Inside were financial statements, transaction records, and witness testimonies Marcus had been quietly gathering for months. This is more than I gave you. I've been busy. 2 former employees came forward with discrimination complaints they'd been too afraid to file while they worked there. 1 current employee provided evidence of Richard forcing staff to work off the clock without pay. And the IRS has been very interested in those offshore accounts you documented. The IRS? Lily looked up sharply. Anonymous tip. Completely unrelated to our activities, of course. Marcus's expression was innocent. But their forensic accountants are remarkably thorough once they start digging. Daniel leaned forward. What about the clients? If there's a leadership change, won't they get nervous? Already handled. Marcus pulled out another document. I've been quietly reaching out to your top 15 accounts. Explained that there may be organizational changes, but that the leadership they've been working with, specifically you, Lily, will have expanded authority. Henderson, Westfield, and Morrison have all indicated they'd be comfortable with that transition. Several specifically said they'd been working with you anyway and barely knew Richard existed. Lily felt something warm spread through her chest. Validation. Recognition. Proof that her 7 years of work hadn't been invisible. Regardless of what Richard claimed. What about the employees? She'd been worrying about them constantly. 75 people depended on Pierce and Associates for their livelihoods. I don't want this to hurt them. I've drafted severance packages and retention bonuses for everyone except Richard and his 2 cronies in upper management. Marcus tapped the folder. The company's financials are stronger than Richard knows. He's been skimming so much off the top that he hasn't noticed how profitable the actual operations are. Once we remove the leaks, there's plenty of money to take care of people properly. Over the next 2 weeks, Lily worked from home, careful not to be seen anywhere near the office. She held video calls with Marcus, organized documents, and rehearsed every possible conversation that might occur during the board meeting. Meanwhile, Richard was falling apart in spectacular fashion. Michelle, still employed and still feeding Lily information, sent daily updates. He's screaming at everyone. Fired 2 people this week for minor mistakes. Looks like he's not sleeping. The new VP he hired can't handle anything and keeps asking where your files are. Another message. He knows something's coming, but not what. Hired a private investigator to dig into your background. Joke's on him. Everything you've done is completely legal. Then, board meeting is tomorrow. He just gathered all senior staff and gave this unhinged speech about loyalty and traitors. People are updating their resumes. The night before the meeting, Lily couldn't sleep. She stood in her home office, looking at the wall where she'd pinned a timeline of everything that had led to this moment. 7 years of work. 5 years of secret preparation. 3 weeks of final execution. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Lily Carter? A man's voice, smooth and threatening. This is Gerald Hoffman, Mr. Pierce's attorney. We need to discuss your attendance at tomorrow's board meeting. I don't think we do. Mr. Pierce is willing to offer you a settlement. $200,000 to walk away quietly. Sign an NDA. No legal action, no drama. Given your current employment situation, it's generous. Lily almost laughed. $200,000. Less than her annual salary had been. Less than a single month's revenue from accounts she'd personally secured. Tell Mr. Pierce I'll see him at 10 a.m. Miss Carter, I strongly advise. She hung up. An hour later, another call. Richard himself, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. What the hell are you playing at, Lily? Who do you think you are? Calling board meetings. You don't have authority. You don't even work here anymore. Is there a question in there, Richard? This is corporate sabotage. I'll bury you with legal fees before you get anywhere near my company. Your company. The words hung in the air like poison. See you tomorrow, Richard. 10 a.m. Don't be late. She ended the call and blocked his number. Daniel found her standing at the window, watching the city lights. You okay? I'm perfect. And she was. The fear had burned away, leaving only cold certainty. He's terrified and he doesn't even know why yet. What do you think he'll do when he finds out? Lily turned to face her husband, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Honestly, I think he'll wish he'd never met me. The next morning, Lily dressed in a charcoal gray suit, her grandmother's pearl necklace, and the confidence of someone who'd spent 7 years earning what she was about to take. Marcus picked her up at 9:30, carrying 3 briefcases full of documentation. Ready? He asked. Lily looked at the Pierce & Associates building in the distance, gleaming in the morning sun. I've been ready for 5 years. Let's go introduce Richard to his new boss. The conference room on the 18th floor of Pierce & Associates had never felt smaller. Richard sat at the head of the mahogany table, his lawyer Gerald Hoffman on his right, his new VP replacement on his left. 3 minor shareholders occupied chairs along the wall, looking confused about why they'd been summoned. Security stood by the door, per Richard's orders. At 9:58 a.m., the door opened. Lily walked in wearing confidence like armor. Marcus Chen 2 steps behind carrying those briefcases. She didn't look at Richard, didn't acknowledge his presence. She simply took the seat directly opposite him at the far end of the table. What is this? Richard's voice was acid. You're trespassing. Security, escort this woman out immediately. Actually, Marcus said calmly, opening his first briefcase, my client has every right to be here. As the majority shareholder of this company, she's not only permitted to attend board meetings, she's required to. The room went silent. Richard laughed. It sounded hollow. Majority shareholder, have you lost your mind? I own this company. My father built it. Your father co-founded it with Margaret Carter in 1987. Marcus placed the original partnership agreement on the table. She invested 60% of the initial capital. Your father contributed 40%. When he died in 2001, you inherited his shares. What you didn't know was that Margaret never sold hers. That's impossible. My father bought her out when she retired. He tried. She declined. Marcus slid a notarized letter across the table. Dated 2002. Margaret's shares passed to her estate, and 5 years ago were legally transferred to her granddaughter. He gestured to Lily. Lily Carter owns 51% of Pierce & Associates. You own 49%, which means this meeting is being called to order by the actual controlling shareholder. Lily watched the color drain from Richard's face. It was even better than she'd imagined. This is fraud, Gerald Hoffman sputtered, snatching the documents. These certificates are fake. This is corporate espionage. Everything's authenticated and registered with the state. Marcus was enjoying himself now. You're welcome to verify, but you'll find it's all legitimate. Miss Carter has been the silent majority owner for 5 years. She simply chose not to exercise her rights until now. One of the minor shareholders, an elderly man named Theodore who'd been friends with Richard's father, cleared his throat. If this is true, why are we here? Lily spoke for the first time, her voice clear and steady. We're here because Richard Pierce has been systematically defrauding this company, its clients, and its employees. We're here because he's committed crimes that require immediate action. And we're here because I'm removing him from all positions of authority, effective immediately. You can't do this! Richard was on his feet now, his face turning red. I built this company. You were nothing when I hired you. A nobody with a degree and an attitude. I was the person who saved your sinking ship. Lily opened her own folder. Let's talk about what you built, Richard. December 2019, you falsified the quarterly reports to inflate revenue by 42%. Here are the real numbers versus what you reported to investors. She slid documents across the table. The minor shareholders leaned forward, frowning. March 2021, you opened offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and funneled company profits through shell corporations. Here are the bank statements, the transfer receipts, and the tax forms you never filed. More papers. Gerald Hoffman was speed reading, his expression growing darker. June 2022, you settled 3 discrimination lawsuits with NDAs to hide the pattern of harassment complaints against you. Here are testimonies from former employees detailing your behavior. Richard's new VP was staring at him in horror. Theodore looked like he might be sick. And 2 weeks ago, you terminated me without cause on my wedding day, then initiated a slander campaign to destroy my professional reputation. Here are emails you sent to competitors, phone records of calls you made to my clients spreading lies, and text messages coordinating your attack. Lily stood, her hands flat on the table. The IRS is already investigating the offshore accounts. 3 former employees have filed formal complaints with the Department of Labor. 5 current employees have retained counsel regarding workplace violations. And every single one of our major clients has been informed that you, Richard Pierce, do not speak for this company. I do. This is insane. Richard looked around wildly for support and found none. You can't believe her. She's making this up because I fired her. She's vindictive. She's the owner. Marcus's voice cut through the room like a knife. And as majority shareholder, Ms. Carter is exercising her right to call for an immediate vote on leadership restructure. Theodore raised his hand slowly. I move that Richard Pierce be removed from all executive positions and board membership, effective immediately. The second shareholder, a woman named Patricia, nodded. I second the motion. All in favor? Marcus looked around the table. 3 hands went up. Then Marcus raised his hand as proxy for Lily's shares. The motion passes. Richard Pierce, you are hereby removed from Pierce and Associates. Security will escort you from the building. You have 1 hour to collect personal belongings under supervision. All company property, including electronics, files, and client information, remains on premises. Richard stared at Lily, and she saw the exact moment he understood. The same way she'd understood 3 weeks ago when he fired her. The same betrayal, the same shock, the same realization that the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. You planned this, he whispered. All of it. For years. No, Richard. I plan to do this properly, professionally, months from now. Lily's voice was ice. You're the one who decided to humiliate me publicly on the most important day of my life. You forced my hand. So yes, I accelerated the timeline. And yes, I made sure that when you fell hard enough that you'd never get back up. Security moved toward Richard. He jerked away from their reaching hands. This company will fail without me. You think you can run it? You're just an analyst who got lucky. I was the VP who built your client base, streamlined your operations, and covered for your incompetence for 7 years. Lily gathered her folders. The company will be fine. Better than fine. Because unlike you, I actually know how it works. As security escorted Richard toward the door, he turned back one last time. You'll regret this, Lily. I'll make sure of it. No, Richard. She met his eyes without flinching. The only person in this room with regrets is you. And you'll have the rest of your life to sit with them. The door closed behind him. The sound of his shouting faded down the corridor. Lily turned to the remaining shareholders. I know this is irregular. I apologize for the shock, but I promise you this company is in good hands. Better hands than it's ever been in. Theodore studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. Your grandmother would be proud. She always said you had steel in you. After the formal votes and paperwork, after the shareholders left and the lawyers departed, Lily stood alone in the conference room. Through the windows, she could see Richard on the street below. security guards handing him a small box of personal items. He stood there for a moment, looking up at the building that had been his kingdom. Then he walked away, just another man on a Manhattan sidewalk, disappearing into the crowd. Lily pulled out her phone and called Daniel. "It's done. How do you feel?" She thought about it. Powerful, vindicated, and ready to get to work. If you've made it this far in this story of justice and comeuppance, you already know that sometimes the best revenge isn't rage, it's patience and preparation. Stick around to see what happens next. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "The staff is gathering in the main conference room. They've heard rumors. You should address them." Lily nodded, straightening her jacket. Time to meet her employees. Not as the fired VP, but as their new CEO. She walked through the office, and every eye turned toward her. 75 employees packed into the main conference room, their faces showing confusion, fear, and curiosity. Lily stood at the front, the same spot where Richard had given his loyalty speech just weeks ago. "My name is Lily Carter," she began. "Some of you know me as the VP who was terminated 3 weeks ago. What you don't know is that I'm also the majority owner of this company. I have been for 5 years." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Richard Pierce is no longer with Pierce & Associates. The offshore accounts, the falsified reports, the harassment complaints, all of it ends today. Marcus Chen will be conducting a full audit over the next month. If you've experienced discrimination, unpaid overtime, or any workplace violations, you'll have a chance to come forward without retaliation. Michelle from accounting raised her hand tentatively. "What happens to us?" "You keep your jobs. With raises." Lily pulled up a spreadsheet on the projection screen. "These are the actual profit margins for the past 3 years. Richard told you we couldn't afford proper compensation. That was a lie. Starting next quarter, all salaries will be adjusted to market rate. We're also implementing profit sharing, proper parental leave, and mental health benefits." The room erupted in surprised conversation. "One more thing," Lily continued. "The culture here changes now. Open door policy. Anonymous feedback channels. Zero tolerance for harassment or discrimination. This company was built on partnership, and that's what it's going back to." Jennifer from accounting stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up when he fired you. I was scared of losing my job. You're not alone in that fear, and I don't blame you for it." Lily's voice softened. "But that era is over. No one should be afraid to do the right thing at their workplace." The applause started slowly, then built into a wave that filled the room. Over the next 6 months, Lily rebuilt Pierce & Associates from the ground up. The company's name was officially changed to Carter & Associates, honoring her grandmother's legacy. The Henderson account expanded their contract by 40% once Richard was gone. Westfield referred 3 new clients. Morrison publicly praised the new leadership in a trade magazine profile. Richard Pierce's downfall was comprehensive and very public. The IRS investigation resulted in criminal charges for tax evasion and fraud. He faced 17 counts, each carrying potential prison time. His legal fees consumed his savings. His Hampton homes were seized as assets. His country club membership was revoked. His wife filed for divorce after discovering he'd gambled away their children's college funds trying to pay lawyers. The industry publications that had once celebrated him now dissected his crimes in detail. "How Richard Pierce Fooled Manhattan for a Decade," read one headline. "The Consultant Who Couldn't Consult His Way Out of Prison," read another. Gerald Hoffman, his lawyer, was disbarred for his role in covering up the offshore accounts. The new VP Richard had hired on the day he fired Lily lasted 2 weeks before resigning in disgrace when his own fabricated credentials were exposed. But the most poetic justice came 8 months after the board meeting. Lily received a letter, handwritten on plain paper, postmarked from a modest apartment in Queens. Richard's handwriting, shaky and desperate. "Lily, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm broke. My reputation is destroyed. I'm facing 10 years in prison. The prosecutor offered a deal if I cooperate fully with the ongoing investigations. They want me to testify about other executives who use similar schemes. My lawyer says having character witnesses could help with sentencing. I'm asking if you would consider writing a letter on my behalf. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement that I built something before I destroyed it. Please. Lily read it twice, then placed it in a folder labeled Richard Pierce Archive. She didn't respond. 2 weeks later, Richard was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. No character witnesses appeared on his behalf. The judge specifically cited his pattern of arrogance and abuse of power in determining the sentence. 1 year after taking control of Carter and Associates, Lily stood in the corner office that had once been Richard's. She'd redecorated completely. The ostentatious art was gone, replaced by photos of her team at company events. The massive desk was replaced with a more collaborative workspace. The view of Manhattan was the same, but everything else had changed. Daniel appeared in the doorway with coffee. Board meeting go well? Theodore nominated me for the Businesswoman of the Year award. Patricia seconded it. Lily smiled. And we just closed the Morrison expansion deal. That's $53 million in new revenue. Your grandmother would be proud. She knew this would happen eventually. She told me the truth about the shares on my 27th birthday, made me promise to wait until I was ready. Lily looked at the framed photo of Margaret on her desk. She said that power given too early is wasted, but power earned is unshakable. Her phone buzzed. Michelle from accounting, now promoted to CFO, sent a message in the company group chat. First quarter profits are in. Up 67% from last year. Everyone's getting bonuses. The replies came flooding in. Dozens of employees celebrating, thanking Lily, sharing their excitement. This was what Richard had never understood. Companies weren't built on fear and control. They were built on respect, fair treatment, and genuine leadership. He'd ruled through intimidation and wondered why people didn't fight for him when he fell. Lily led through integrity and watched her team rally around the mission she'd created. That evening, Lily and Daniel walked through Central Park, the same path they'd taken on their first date 3 years ago. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, golden and red in the fading light. Do you ever regret not telling him earlier? Daniel asked, about the shares, about who really had the power. No, Lily's answer was immediate. If I'd revealed it before I was ready, before I had evidence of his crimes, he would have found a way to fight it. Lawyers, delays, muddy the waters. By waiting, by documenting everything, I ensured that when I moved, it was checkmate. Not just check. And the wedding day firing? His biggest mistake and my greatest gift. Lily stopped walking, turning to face her husband, because it showed everyone who he really was. When I walked back into that building as the owner, people weren't surprised by his downfall. They'd seen his cruelty firsthand. That made the transition seamless. Daniel pulled her close. You're terrifying and I love it. She laughed, the sound carrying across the park. 2 years later, Carter and Associates had expanded to 3 offices, employed 200 people, and was recognized as one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the country. Lily published a book titled The Long Game: How Patience Became My Greatest Weapon. It became a bestseller in business strategy circles. Richard Pierce served his sentence in a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. His former colleagues never visited. His ex-wife never wrote. He had nothing but time to reflect on the moment he decided to fire Lily Carter on her wedding day. The decision that had cost him everything. On the 3rd anniversary of taking over the company, Lily stood in front of 200 employees at their annual gala. She raised her glass for a toast. 3 years ago, I was escorted out of a building I'd helped build, humiliated on what should have been the happiest day of my life. Someone powerful thought he could erase me, destroy my reputation, and take credit for my work forever. She paused, looking around at the faces of her team. He was wrong, because here's what I learned. You can't destroy someone who knows their worth. You can't erase someone who's documented their value. And you can't defeat someone who has the patience to wait for the right moment. The applause was thunderous. To everyone who's ever been underestimated, fired unjustly, or told they don't belong in the room where decisions are made, remember this: they're not giving you a seat at the table because they don't realize you could own the whole building. Your job isn't to beg for recognition. It's to be so undeniably excellent that when your moment comes, no one can deny what you've earned. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Later, As the party wound down, Theodore approached Lily. At 83, he moved slower now, but his eyes were still sharp. "Your grandmother told me something once," he said quietly. "Right after she signed those shares over to you. She said, 'Richard Pierce thinks he won when he pushed me out. He has no idea he's been sitting on a ticking time bomb for 20 years. And when Lily's ready, when she's learned everything she needs to learn, that bomb is going to go off and rebuild this company the way it should have been from the start.'" Lily felt tears prick her eyes. I wish she could see this. Oh, she knew. She absolutely knew. Theodore squeezed her shoulder. "That's why she waited. That's why she gave the shares to you. She knew you'd do it right." Lily Carter stood on the rooftop terrace of her company headquarters, looking out at the Manhattan skyline glittering in the darkness. Somewhere in that vast city, Richard Pierce existed in his reduced circumstances, living with the consequences of his cruelty. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate required energy, and she had better uses for hers. She'd learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was construction. Building something so successful, so respected, so undeniably excellent that your enemy's absence became irrelevant. Richard had fired her on her wedding day, thinking he was ending her story. Instead, he'd just written the first chapter of his own downfall and given her the motivation to stop holding back. And that, Lily thought as Daniel joined her on the terrace with champagne, was the greatest gift he could have possibly given her. If this journey from humiliation to triumph resonated with you, if you've ever been knocked down and had to find the strength to rise even higher, then you understand what this story is really about. It's not about revenge. It's about resilience. It's not about destroying your enemies. It's about building something they could never touch. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refused to stay down, who turned their worst moments into their greatest victories, and who proved that patience, preparation, and principle will always defeat arrogance, shortcuts, and cruelty. Because in the end, the people who tried to bury you never realized they were just planting seeds.